Nobody dared to challenge Judge Alistair Donovan. He dismissed evidence with a grin, twisted the law to favor the powerful, crushed poor defendants under frivolous contempt charges, and he did it all while laughing behind that polished bench he believed. He was untouchable, nobody could bring him down, but he's about to discover that justice is coming from outside the courtroom, from a source with the power to place even the highest judge on trial. The FBI has his name on a sealed warrant, and when they walk through those courtroom doors, everything changes. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you're reading from, and don't forget to subscribe. Judge Alistair Donovan always liked to start his morning with a slow, theatrical stroll into his private chambers. He claimed it was a sacred ritual that cleared his mind before presiding over daily court matters. In reality, he just enjoyed letting court staff stand awkwardly, waiting for him to grace them with his presence. On this brisk Monday morning, the courthouse bustled as usual. Attorneys hustled through corridors, interns scrambled with paperwork, and anxious defendants waited on benches, hands trembling as they contemplated their fates. Almost everyone dreaded ending up in Donovan's courtroom. The rumor was he thrived on fear. The higher the stakes, the more he reveled in his twisted performance. Deputy Clerk Nina Vasquez knocked on the judge's door exactly at 8:50 a.m. She tried not to sigh when he made her wait a full minute before calling her in with a casual, "Enter." When she stepped inside, Judge Donovan was leaning back in his chair, polished shoes on his desk. Despite his advanced age, he had a lean frame and eyes that gleamed with perpetual amusement. He often said, "A real judge can smell a lie before it's even spoken." Yet Nina suspected his sense of smell was reserved for vulnerabilities he could exploit. "Morning, Judge," she said. "Your docket is full, including the Blythe custody case at 9 sharp. A slow grin spread across his lips. "Yes, the Blythe matter. I recall the father lacks proper legal counsel, can barely afford an attorney. Something about drug allegations, right?" Nina glanced at her notes. "Yes, sir. Allegations that never led to charges." Donovan let out a soft chuckle. "Then I suppose I'll have to lecture him on responsibility. Maybe tack on contempt if he speaks out of turn. We'll see." Nina stiffened. Every day she observed Donovan's patterns, skewing bail amounts, setting impossible fines for minor infractions, scolding the defendants with savage delight. She could do little more than record the proceedings. At 9 a.m. sharp, the Blythe custody hearing began. The father stood near tears, explaining how he'd turned his life around, but Donovan repeatedly cut him off. "Irrelevant," the judge said. "Focus on the facts at hand." An older woman in the gallery, likely the father's aunt, murmured in frustration. Donovan's hawk-like gaze locked on her. "Do you have something to add, Ms.?" She shook her head, fear coloring her face. Donovan leaned back, lips curling. "Let's keep interruptions to a minimum. Another outburst, and I'll have you removed for contempt." The father's attorney tried to present evidence that the mother had previously violated restraining orders, but Donovan waved it away, claiming it was stale information. Meanwhile, he called the father's past drug use a vital consideration. In less than 30 minutes, Donovan ruled that custody would remain solely with the mother, ignoring protests from the defense. Then, as if mocking them, he gave the father a pitying smile. "Better luck next time," he said. A hush fell over the courtroom. Donovan hammered his gavel with a flourish, and the father slumped, devastated. People said he was brutal, but Donovan liked to think he was teaching hard lessons. Often, those lessons hurt the poor, the marginalized, anyone who couldn't muster the means to fight back. That day, his laughter echoed through the corridors. He was unstoppable, or so he believed. Outside, in the hallway, Nina caught a glimpse of a tall figure in a crisp suit flipping through documents. The man looked up, offered her a cordial nod, and disappeared behind another door. Something about him, his calm, almost analytical demeanor, made her pause. She wondered if he was one of Donovan's prospective adversaries, but she had never seen him before. Meanwhile, over in a downtown office, Assistant U.S. Attorney Layla, Burton peered at an evidence board plastered with names, dates, and photographs. At the center, a photograph of Judge Donovan wearing his judicial robe. Beneath it, sticky notes read undue influence, money laundering, and suspected bribery. Layla traced a line from Donovan to a wealthy contractor indicted for fraud. The contractor had unexpectedly been granted lenient penalties in Donovan's court. Another line connected Donovan to a real estate magnate who boasted about a judge in his back pocket. Stepping into the office, FBI Special Agent Carter Holmes studied the board, arms folded. "We've been tracking Donovan's suspicious rulings for months," he said. "Kickbacks disguised as business deals or real estate investments. We suspect he's funneling dirty money through a shell company." Layla nodded, tapping a document. "We also have eyewitness accounts. People claiming Donovan threatened them or hinted at bribes, but it's all scattered. We need a smoking gun, something that ties him directly to a federal crime." Carter's brow tightened. "We might get that soon. One of Donovan's former law clerks agreed to talk. She's coming in this afternoon." Layla's phone buzzed with an incoming text from a federal judge known for championing judicial integrity. The text read, "Hearing rumors. Donovan is rattled, probably aware something is brewing. Move fast." Layla locked eyes with Carter. "We have to move faster. If Donovan suspects a federal investigation, he'll bury evidence or threaten witnesses." Carter rapped his knuckles on the desk. "We're building a sealed warrant. Once we have enough, we arrest him in court. He'll never see it coming." In his lavish home on the outskirts of the city, Donovan sipped brandy that evening, going through a hidden ledger. Page after page listed favors, extended to certain defendants, hush payments, and coded notations. Each line represented a life he'd ruined or a fortune he'd made. Glancing at the final entry, he smirked. He had no clue an FBI task force was piecing together the puzzle behind the scenes. He had no idea the corridor outside his courtroom would soon become the stage for his reckoning. By the next morning, Donovan leaned back on the bench, grin firmly in place, prepared to deliver another day of skewed rulings. Laughter filled his chest whenever he thought about so-called justice. To him, justice was a tool that bent to those cunning enough to twist it. But in a nearby office, Agent Holmes donned his jacket, clipped his badge, and nodded at Layla. They were preparing for the final phase. They'd charge in, evidence in hand, right when Donovan thought he was safe. Nina hurried into the courthouse. That next day, her gut wound tight with worry. Maybe it was the tension thickening in the air, or the half-dozen rumors swirling among clerks and assistants. Everyone whispered that something big was coming, though nobody seemed to know details. Judge Donovan arrived later than usual, strolling past Nina's desk with an uncharacteristically stiff nod, no playful banter. Maybe he felt the intangible friction, too, or perhaps he was wrapped up in some new scheme. Court began with the usual line of cases: minor theft, drug possession, and a smattering of probation violations. Donovan devoured them like a hungry wolf, handing out maximum fines, ignoring requests for leniency. Each defendant walked away looking shell-shocked. Between cases, Donovan slipped into his chambers, leaving Nina alone in the courtroom. The bailiff, Miller, a broad-shouldered man with a stern jaw, approached her. He kept his voice low. "Nina, you hear anything about the judge being investigated?" Her heart jumped. She shook her head, playing innocent. "No, but people talk." Miller's gaze flicked toward the judge's empty bench. "Rumor is the feds might be sniffing around. That's serious business. If it's true, well, it could get messy." Nina managed a tight smile. "I'm sure it's just talk." But inside, her thoughts whirled. She had her own suspicions about Donovan, had seen him do things that felt wrong. Across town, in a small, nondescript conference room. Layla Burton sipped stale coffee while across the table sat Claire Winston, Donovan's former law clerk. Claire looked frail, her gaze darting anxiously to the door every time footsteps sounded outside. "Take your time," Layla said softly, sliding Claire a glass of water. "Any detail can help." Claire's hand trembled around the glass. "When I worked under Judge Donovan, he told me to lose certain files, specifically ones where wealthy defendants had serious evidence stacked against them. It would be refiled incorrectly or vanish entirely. He also kept personal notes about how much each defendant was worth to him. I realized it meant bribery." Layla exchanged a look with Carter Holmes, who took notes diligently. "Were you complicit?" he asked, not accusing, just factual. I was scared," Claire whispered. "He threatened to blackball me from legal circles, so I did as told. But it got worse. I overheard phone calls, discussing money transfers, intimidation tactics. I felt sick." Carter set his pen down. "We'll protect you, Ms. Winston. Your testimony is crucial." Claire's eyes brimmed with relief and fear. "I just want him stopped." Layla tapped a folder. "We're close. With your testimony, we can finalize a sealed indictment. Then we'll move in. Judge Donovan's day is coming." Back at the courthouse, Donovan scrolled through texts on his phone, face pinched with annoyance. One message read, "Heard rumors about an FBI meeting. Watch your step." Another read, "Need to clean up any loose ends?" He sneered. Loose ends. Like anyone could possibly outsmart him. He'd been in the game for years, securing alliances with wealthy players, ensuring law enforcement cronies looked the other way. Even if the feds poked around, he was certain his tracks were well covered. Still, something nagged at him. Leaning over his desk, he made a call to a friend in the district attorney's office. The friend answered, voice hushed. Donovan asked if any formal investigations had begun. The friend feigned ignorance, said, "Haven't heard a thing, Alistair." But Donovan detected tension in his tone. He hung up, cursing under his breath. Then he stood, straightened his robe, and marched back into the courtroom to preside over a new batch of cases, determined to act unbothered. Meanwhile, Nina watched him closely from her clerk's station. Every once in a while, a flicker of something like unease crossed his face. He was acting less amused than normal. The laughter that so often accompanied his rulings seemed subdued. When the midday recess came, Donovan retreated to his chambers again. Nina took a brief break, scurrying to the hallway coffee station. She was stirring her cup when that same tall man from the day before reappeared. He wore a crisp suit, carried a slim briefcase, and had an air of authority. He offered a polite smile. "Excuse me, do you know if Judge Donovan's court is back? In session?" Nina recognized him now. Agent Carter Holmes from the FBI. She'd glimpsed him on local news segments before. Her pulse sped up. "It starts again in 15 minutes. Carter nodded. "Thank you." Without further explanation, he disappeared, around the corner, leaving Nina trembling with curiosity and a jolt of hope. 15 minutes later, Donovan re-entered the courtroom, adjusting his robe with restless energy. He scanned the audience. A few attorneys, some family members of defendants, and at the far back, Carter Holmes, quietly observing. The judge's lips tightened. He cleared his throat, beginning the next case. The defendant was a middle-aged woman charged with embezzling small funds from her workplace. She'd never had legal trouble before, but Donovan launched into a patronizing lecture. "This court abhors theft," he declared. "You violated your employer's trust. People like you degrade the moral fabric of our society." He paused, noticing Carter's unwavering gaze. Something about it unnerved him. "Still," he pressed on, "accordingly, I am imposing a maximum fine and a custodial sentence." A small gasp rippled through the gallery. The woman's attorney started to protest, but Donovan hammered his gavel. "That's enough. Court is adjourned for now." He rose, but the tension in the room was palpable. The woman left in tears, while Donovan strode briskly to his chambers, ignoring everyone in his path. Carter Holmes calmly followed him out, vanishing into the hallway's crowd. Once inside his chambers, Donovan slammed the door, frustration brewing. He felt like a target was on his back. He had to confirm or debunk the rumors of an FBI investigation. Yanking his phone from his robe pocket, he dialed a contact known only as R. "It's me," Donovan hissed when the call connected. "I need you to look into a federal agent named Carter Holmes. Why is he snooping around my court?" A voice on the other end promised to find out. Donovan hung up, pacing. If the FBI was truly on his trail, he needed a contingency plan. Perhaps he'd destroy incriminating ledgers, shift assets, or strong-arm a few well-placed officials to shield him. He was so lost in thought he didn't notice Nina approaching until she tapped hesitantly on the partially open door. "Judge, there's a matter waiting outside." Donovan spun. "What matter? Speak up." Nina blinked, stunned by his harsh tone. "A woman named Sarah Harris, requesting an emergency hearing about a protective order." He waved impatiently. "Fine, set it up. I'll handle it now." Nina withdrew, heart pounding. The judge's temper had grown sharper. The entire courthouse seemed braced for a storm. She couldn't guess how soon that storm would hit, but something told her it was swirling close. Word of the looming federal probe spread through hush-hush conversations in hallways and quiet phone calls behind locked doors. Staffers noticed. Unmarked cars occasionally parked on side streets. Lawyers whispered that Judge Donovan's luck might finally run out. The atmosphere in the courthouse felt like the moment before a thunderstorm, thick with electricity. Nina caught more glimpses of Agent Carter Holmes, weaving in and out of proceedings, never causing a scene, just quietly observing. She wondered if Donovan recognized him as an FBI agent or just a curious spectator. The next morning, Donovan arrived earlier than usual. He hustled through security, ignoring the typical pleasantries. For once, he didn't wear that self-satisfied grin. Instead, his jaw was set, and his eyes flicked around as though scanning for threats. He convened court and went through a barrage of criminal cases with mechanical efficiency. Guilty pleas were accepted without much discussion. Defendants or attorneys who tried to argue were met with Donovan's scowl, sometimes spiced with a sarcastic quip. Then came a civil case, Harwood versus Bryson, a dispute over building permits. Harwood was a wealthy developer rumored to have donated large sums to Donovan's re-election campaign back when he was a county judge. On the other side stood Bryson, a small business owner. The proceedings should have been straightforward, but Donovan seized the chance to publicly degrade Bryson, implying he was incompetent. Bryson's attorney tried to present solid evidence, but the judge cut her off repeatedly. Nina watched from her clerk's station, stomach churning. She knew Donovan was burying the truth under procedure and intimidation. Across the aisle, Harwood smirked. He never broke a sweat. After all, he'd taken care of Donovan before. The judge's final ruling hammered Bryson with excessive fees and constraints, handing Harwood an easy victory. The developer left, with a triumphant nod to Donovan, who responded with a nearly imperceptible tilt of his head. Shortly after, Donovan recessed early, retreating to his chambers. Nina found him hunched over a stack of documents, rummaging frantically. She didn't dare ask questions. "Close the door," he snapped. She obeyed, stepping inside, heart pounding. He glanced at her. "Nina, have you heard anything about me from the staff? The attorneys? Anything?" Her chest tightened. "Sir?" "Rumors, accusations, strange questions," he pressed. "Anything that suggests they're out to get me," she swallowed. "People are talking. They say an investigation might be underway, that the FBI is—" He slammed a fist on his desk. "They have nothing on me, understand?" Nina winced. She forced a nod. "Yes, sir." He exhaled slowly, reining in his temper. "I need you to do me a favor." Her mind raced. What kind of favor? He rose, walked to a locked cabinet, and extracted a slim folder. "I want you to place this in the evidence room. Make sure it's filed under an obscure reference number. And if anyone asks, you've never seen it." Nina's pulse hammered. She stared at the folder, uncertain what it contained. "Judge, He cut her off with a cold glare. "Do it! You value your job, right?" She nodded reluctantly, taking the folder. The tension felt suffocating. She left his chambers feeling as though she carried dynamite. In a nearby corridor, she almost ran into Agent Holmes. She froze, folder clutched tight. He offered a polite apology for nearly colliding, then moved on. But Nina's nerves crackled with guilt. Part of her wanted to slip the folder to him and spill everything. But fear held her back. Donovan's wrath was real. Meanwhile, Carter headed to a small break room where Layla was leaning over a laptop. She glanced up, eyes narrowing. "We got a tip from a clerk that Donovan just had a meltdown in his chambers. Something about burying paperwork." Carter nodded. "We can't wait much longer. Our sealed indictment is almost ready. Once it's official, we move in." He frowned, scanning an email from Claire Winston, who was feeding them more details. "Donovan's intimidation is ramping up. He's forcing staff to hide files, messing with the record system. We need to protect the clerks and bring him down before he does more damage." Layla clicked on her laptop, opening an official document. "I have the final draft of the indictment. I'll show it to the judge who's overseeing our warrant request. If he signs off, we could arrest Donovan as early as tomorrow." Carter's phone buzzed. He read the message from his supervisor. "Proceed with caution. Donovan may have allies in local law enforcement." He sighed. "Let's be ready for anything." That afternoon, Nina slipped the mysterious folder into the evidence room. She put it under an unrelated case number, heart hammering with each keystroke. She felt complicit, hated every second of it. Finishing the task, she exited the room to find Donovan waiting in the hallway. His cold smile sent a chill up her spine. "Good job," he murmured. "Go home early today, Nina. You've done enough." Nina forced a nod and fled. She wanted to scream, to resign on the spot, but her family depended on her salary. Conflicted and scared, she hurried out of the courthouse. That evening, Donovan made calls from his study at home. He dialed the real estate magnate, the wealthy contractor, and 2 local officials he'd done favors for. He demanded reassurances that they'd back him if the feds came knocking. All gave vague promises, but none offered the ironclad loyalty he wanted. He tried to calm himself with brandy again, flipping through that shadowy ledger. The hush money, the rigged rulings, the hidden alliances. He believed these pages guaranteed his control, but now they felt like a liability. Perhaps he should shred them. But then, how would he keep track of who owed him what? Eventually, he decided to hide the ledger at his private cabin in the woods. If anyone tried to search his home, they'd find nothing. With that plan in mind, he managed a smirk. Yes, he thought. He still controlled the script. He'd survive. Little did he know that at that very moment, Layla Burton was finalizing the indictment. A federal judge would sign it by morning. Special Agent Carter Holmes had already alerted a specialized arrest team. Everyone was poised to strike. Tomorrow, the mighty Judge Donovan would step into his courtroom for what he assumed would be another day of undisputed power. Tomorrow, the feds would walk through the doors, armed with warrants and unstoppable authority. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of the courthouse, casting multicolored patterns across the marble floors. Judge Donovan arrived at 8:45 a.m., precisely 15 minutes before court was to begin. He walked with his usual confident stride, robe draped over his arm. Yet his eyes flicked nervously around, half expecting to see suspicious figures waiting. Nina stood at her desk, eyes lowered. She'd hardly slept, wrestling with fear and guilt. The folder she'd hidden wouldn't stay hidden forever. If the FBI discovered her involvement, she could be in trouble. But revealing Donovan's request might cost her job, or worse. He paused at her desk, voice low. "Everything ready?" She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. He continued on to the courtroom, trailing a faint whiff of cologne that, under different circumstances, might have seemed pleasant. Now it just made her stomach churn. Inside, the gallery filled with people waiting for their cases. A child custody dispute, a breach of contract hearing, and 3 sentencing hearings. Donovan's docket was heavy. His assistant gave him a polite greeting, but he didn't respond. His gaze snagged on a tall man seated in the back row. Agent Carter Holmes. Again. Donovan's lips pressed into a thin line. He took his seat, forced his face into a neutral expression, and called the first case. The child custody dispute turned contentious. The mother accused the father of emotional abuse, while the father claimed the mother was alienating him from the child. Donovan flipped through documents with bored disinterest, occasionally smirking as they argued. Then he gave a startlingly quick ruling in favor of the mother, ignoring the father's pleas that she'd threatened to disappear with the child. Donovan hammered the gavel, concluding, "That's enough. You can file an appeal if you don't like it." He glanced at the back row. Carter Holmes was scribbling in a small notebook, expression unreadable. The next hearing was equally swift. A breach of contract suit. Donovan asked a few clipped questions, then ruled in favor of the wealthier party. The losing attorney's jaw tightened, as though suspecting foul play. Finally, the sentencing hearings began. Donovan reveled in handing down harsh punishments. One defendant, a teenager caught shoplifting, was given an unusually stiff penalty. Donovan only smirked, as if proud of his severity. By now, the tension in the courtroom was tangible. People whispered about the stranger in the back row taking notes. Donovan kept his composure, but each case ended more abruptly than the last. Then, just as he was about to call a recess, the double doors swung open. Layla Burton stepped in, flanked by 2 other federal agents, badges visible at their belts. Carter stood, quietly joining them. A sharp hush fell over the room. Donovan's eyebrows shot up. "This is a court of law," he said, voice booming. "Identify yourselves or you'll be removed for disrupting proceedings." Layla stepped forward, her tone calm but firm. "My name is Layla Burton, Assistant U.S. Attorney. With me are Special Agents Carter Holmes and Danielle Pham from the FBI. She slid a set of papers onto the clerk's desk, addressing Donovan with unwavering resolve. "Judge Alistair Donovan, we have a federal warrant for your arrest." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Donovan's face darkened, shock and rage flickering in his eyes. "Arrest? On what grounds?" Layla's voice remained steady, echoing, for all to hear. "Charges include conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice, and violations of federal racketeering statutes." She turned to Nina, who sat frozen at her station, wide-eyed. "We need the court record sealed. This proceeding is officially under federal jurisdiction." Donovan rose to his full height, attempting to project authority. "You dare come into my courtroom, and try to arrest me?" Carter stepped forward, brandishing the warrant. "You are no longer presiding here, Judge Donovan. As of this moment, you're suspended pending trial." Rattled murmurs swept through the audience. Donovan's loyal bailiff, Miller, started to step between the agents and the judge, but Carter gently held up a hand. "We're not here to create a scene, but we will enforce this warrant." Donovan's voice vibrated with indignation. "This is outrageous. I have powerful allies, people who will defend me." Layla didn't blink. "And you're entitled to due process, but we have evidence of your wrongdoing. You can speak to your attorney. Right now, please place your hands where we can see them." For a moment, it looked as though Donovan might refuse. Then, with a tremor of building fury, he slowly raised his hands. Two agents approached, handcuffs at the ready. The entire courtroom watched in stunned silence as they locked cuffs around the wrists of a judge who, until that moment, had seemed untouchable. Nina's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. Part of her felt relief, part terror. She caught Donovan's eye. His glare was venomous. She turned away, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. Agent Carter signaled to the bailiff to clear the gallery. Onlookers filed out, some outraged, some gleeful, many just stunned by the spectacle of a corrupt judge being taken down in broad daylight. Donovan sneered, struggling to keep his composure. "I'll destroy you in court," he growled at Layla. "Do you understand who I am?" She stared him down. "We do. That's exactly why we're here." They led him from the bench down the aisle where he'd once paraded with absolute confidence. Now, behind him, the gallery seats stood empty, except for a few stragglers peering in shock. The click of cameras from local reporters outside the courtroom signaled that the news would spread far and wide within minutes. Some part of Donovan still believed he could wriggle free. He mumbled under his breath about high connections, judges owing him favors, transactions that might buy his silence. But the FBI had come prepared. They had every piece of evidence needed to make those connections worthless. Outside, as the agents escorted Donovan to an unmarked federal sedan, a throng of media awaited. Microphones jutted forward. Flashes popped in his face. He tried to conceal his face behind his cuffed hands, cursing under his breath. Layla stepped to a makeshift podium. "Judge Donovan has been placed under arrest on multiple federal charges. No further comments at this time. Thank you." Carter guided Donovan into the car, then slipped into the passenger seat. The door slammed, sealing the judge's fate. They drove off, leaving behind a whirlwind of stunned onlookers. Back inside, Nina remained at her station, trembling. She stared at the vacant bench where Donovan had so often laughed at powerless defendants. For the first time since she started working there, she felt a spark of real hope. Maybe justice could win after all. The process of dismantling Judge Donovan's corrupt empire unfolded like an intricate puzzle being rapidly solved. Within hours of his arrest, federal agents swarmed his chambers, seizing computers, files, and the locked cabinet. They found numerous incriminating documents, along with questionable financial ledgers. Nina stood outside the sealed office, heart pounding as an FBI tech carried out the folder she'd hidden at Donovan's command. She dreaded being implicated, but to her surprise, Carter Holmes emerged, giving her a reassuring nod. "We understand you were under duress," he said gently. "Your cooperation going forward can clear you of wrongdoing." Relief washed over her. She nodded, tears threatening to surface. "Thank you," she whispered. While the courthouse buzzed with federal activity, a phone call reached Assistant U.S. Attorney Layla Burton. Donovan's personal ledger had been found in a secret safe at his cabin thanks to a tip from an informant. It listed bribe amounts, coded references to certain rulings, and even the names of other officials he'd paid off or threatened. "This is a gold mine," Layla told Carter. "He can't talk his way out of this. Half the city's power players might be implicated." Carter nodded. "We'll handle them one by one. Right now, Donovan is priority number one." At the federal holding facility, Donovan sat in a stark interrogation room. Gone was his judicial robe, replaced by plain clothes. Two FBI agents, not including Carter or Layla, questioned him. He responded with stony silence. Then, after an hour, he demanded a lawyer, face twisted with rage. Privately, Donovan seethed. He'd always told himself he had a network of supporters who'd bail him out if trouble ever came. But calls to those so-called allies went unanswered. Nobody wanted to defend a sinking ship, He had no choice but to rely on whichever attorney the courts appointed. The irony burned. Judge Donovan, once the final authority over countless lives, was now just another defendant waiting for a hearing. Days blurred into a frenzy of legal motions. Donovan's new attorney filed to dismiss the charges, calling the arrest premature and the evidence circumstantial. But the U.S. Attorney's Office countered with an avalanche of proof, ledgers, witness testimony from Claire Winston, statements from defendants who'd suffered under Donovan's illegal rulings. By the time the preliminary hearing arrived, the media had latched on with fervor. Every major outlet covered the fall of Judge Donovan. Outside the federal courthouse, protesters held signs, "Justice for victims and corruption must end." Others, less sympathetic, sneered that Donovan was simply caught in a political game. Inside, Layla Burton laid out the case with calm precision. She presented bank records showing abnormal deposits tied to known associates. She introduced witness after witness, like an ex-court clerk who testified to Donovan's threats. Finally, she revealed the personal ledger, each entry meticulously coded but undeniably pointing to bribes and payoffs. Donovan fumed at the defense table, occasionally whispering furiously to his lawyer. His usual smug grin was gone, replaced by anxious hostility. The presiding federal judge, a colleague Donovan had once belittled at a conference, listened intently, face impassive. When the prosecution concluded, Donovan's attorney tried to paint a picture of coincidence, claiming the ledger was fabricated or taken out of context. But the arguments wilted under the weight of direct evidence. At last, the judge ruled there was probable cause, ordering Donovan to remain in custody awaiting trial. Spectators erupted with relief or frustration, depending on their stance. Donovan clenched his jaw, but inside he felt like he was drowning. In the weeks that followed, a parade of Donovan's alleged co-conspirators faced their own inquiries. Some cowered, seeking plea deals. Others tried to stand by him, only to be indicted themselves for perjury or aiding in corruption. Donovan realized his empire was crumbling faster than he'd thought possible. Nina found herself testifying before a grand jury, recounting how Donovan had ordered her to hide files. She was terrified, but Layla guided her gently. In the end, Nina's honest testimony became another nail in Donovan's coffin. Claire Winston also took the stand, voice trembling, but resolute. She described how Donovan orchestrated the destruction of key evidence and manipulated case schedules to benefit certain defendants who paid him under the table. The grand jury listened, rapt. It was a rare glimpse behind the veneer of judicial authority. Outside the courthouse, the media labeled Donovan the laughing judge, who used to chuckle at defendants' pleas. Now, ironically, those he wronged watched him face the same system he once twisted. Eventually, the trial began. Layla Burton's opening statement set the tone. The honorable seat of a judge is meant to uphold justice. But Alastair Donovan exploited that seat, turning justice into a commodity for those wealthy enough to buy it and a nightmare for those too poor to matter. She methodically walked the jury through documents, financial transactions, sworn statements, and the damning ledger. Defendants Donovan had railroaded appeared, describing inflated sentences and intimidation. Wealthy donors admitted, under immunity, that they'd funneled money to Donovan for lenient rulings. Donovan's defense attorney sputtered, attempting to sow doubt. But every strategy collapsed against the relentless tide of evidence. The judge peered down at Donovan with professional detachment, occasionally shaking his head. Finally, the jury deliberated. The tension was palpable, reminiscent of Donovan's own courtroom, but reversed. After 9 hours, the verdict arrived. Guilty on multiple counts, fraud, racketeering, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and more. The moment the foreman spoke, Donovan's shoulders sagged. Reporters rushed outside, microphones ready to broadcast the final fall from grace. At sentencing, the presiding judge delivered a scathing rebuke. "You weaponized the bench, undermining faith in our legal system. Your arrogance has done immeasurable harm to this community." Then he handed down a lengthy prison term, decades, effectively the rest of Donovan's life. No laughter escaped Donovan's lips now. He stared blankly as the gavel fell. He was led away in handcuffs, head bowed. The courtroom exhaled, relief and vindication rippling among those who had suffered under his tyranny. Standing outside, Nina blinked in the midday sunlight. She watched Donovan being whisked into a transport van, cameras flashing. Layla Burton and Carter Holmes stepped over, exhaustion mingling with satisfaction in their expressions. Layla gave Nina a small smile. "He won't hurt anyone again." Nina nodded, voice trembling. "Thank you. Thank you for giving us hope that the system can work when good people stand against the bad." Carter gently placed a hand on Nina's shoulder. "You helped. People like you and Claire made this possible." The van's doors slammed shut. Donovan was gone, but the echoes of his corruption lingered. Yet for the first time, Nina gazed at the courthouse with renewed respect. The halls felt lighter, as though the heavy specter of injustice had finally been lifted. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you found it meaningful, share it with someone who loves stories about justice, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And before you go, let me know in the comments. Do you believe in redemption for people? Like Donovan, or should the punishment always fit the crime? See you in the next narrative.